For the final 3 decades of the 20th century, the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center dominated the lower Manhattan skyline, helping define New York City's sense of place to the world. They were immediately recognizable landmarks, the work of the Port Authority and architect Minoru Yamasaki. The Twin Towers loomed at 110 stories, the tallest buildings in the world at the time they were completed. At the dawn of the 21st century, they were not only a successful tourist attraction, not only a visual shorthand for New York itself, but the world's most visible hub of financial services, Lower Manhattan's driver of the global economy. Their abrupt destruction became the defining opener of the 21st century. Although the attacks also struck other targets, the Twin Towers remain the defining visuals of 9/11.
It's going to be a beautiful day today, sunshine throughout.
Tuesday, September 11, 2001, began as another busy morning. As the early shift of personnel with brokerage firms began their day, struggling with a recession following the dot-com bubble of 2000, documentarians Jules and Gideon Naudet worked on their film about a probationary fireman. An uneventful call about a street-level gas leak put Jules Naudet's camera there on the day the world suddenly changed. Suddenly, the firefighters were faced with an unparalleled call of duty. As calls began to radiate to emergency responders, Naudet was driven into the source of the action, his camera the first of many to begin capturing the events at the World Trade Center.
We are just currently getting a look at the World Trade Center. We have something that has happened here, flame and an awful lot of smoke from one of the towers. Whatever has occurred has just occurred.
The impact destroyed the 93rd to 99th stories of the North Tower, cutting off all access to and from the floors above. Yet at first, many believed this was a colossal accident.
What are those people going to do? On the second one? All the elevators are blocked out. Well, the staircases must not be, right?
As firemen began to assess the work they faced, images of the burning tower streamed across the world. Along with police and EMS teams, news organizations and citizen videographers converged on the World Trade Center site. So what happened next was captured by many cameras.
An effort up there, yeah. Now remember, oh my God.
My God.
It was unbelievable seeing this second jet. What is going on?
Emboldened by earlier successes with embassy bombings and the crippling of the USS Cole, terrorist planners with Al-Qaeda had assembled a new strategy. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed suggested a timed attack. Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden approved and financed Mohammed's plan, assisted in its recruitment, and selected American targets. 4 teams of Al-Qaeda hijackers under Mohammed Atta trained for the day they would use fully fueled Boeing 767s as weapons.
And so there could be a massive sabotage going on civilian airplanes by some suicide-type bomber.
Author William Languish would read into these attacks a clumsy metaphor for decapitation, a scimitar hewing the neck, a gesture the Twin Towers in fact withstood, but now both buildings suffered fires across multiple stories. The South Tower was more grievously damaged, with fires raging from the 77th to 85th floors. At the street level, normal life had all but stopped, the gathered crowds joined by hundreds of millions watching from across the world. It was worse for the people trapped above the impact zones, barely able to breathe and unable to escape alive.
And there was smoke everywhere and people are jumping out the windows.
14 people jumping out of windows. It's horrific. I can't believe this is happening.
They're trying to save themselves. I don't know.
But the morning was not over yet. A third airliner, Flight 77, found its mark at the Pentagon, America's military establishment. And a fourth, Flight 93, suddenly left its flight path and took an ominous new course toward Washington. These images were taken from the International Space Station as its orbit carried it over Manhattan. At the surface level, an already bad situation was about to become unimaginably worse.
See the firemen assembled here, the police officers, FBI agents, and you can see the 2 towers. A huge explosion now raining debris on all of us.
full side was collapsing?
The whole building has collapsed.
A situation that started bad just gets worse and worse and worse.
And an eerie quiet settled over the streets as people evacuated, leaving the North Tower as it burned toward its own structural collapse.
That it was a terrorist attack. The Pentagon is engaged, and I'm sure law enforcement is, but they say they had no warning.
At 10:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 93 plunged from the sky as the final team of hijackers, under attack from the plane's passengers, deliberately crashed into a Pennsylvania field. At 10:29, the North Tower transmitter mast sank into the roof and toppled, and the tower began to fall as remaining witnesses fled for their lives.
The tower started to buckle. I just turned and ran, ducked down, put a jacket over my head. 3 or 4 of us huddled together.
The terrorist actions that day claimed 2,996 victims. Of them, 24 were Canadian citizens. Overall, people from 70 different countries had vanished into the Trade Center debris. Fire personnel were now dubbing the site Ground Zero.
Is like right out of a Tom Clancy novel, but could you possibly imagine something like this?
No, one of the problems with being a writer of fiction is that you can't keep up with all the madmen in the world as much as you try. And I frankly would have thought that this was not a credible threat to have 4 separate people decide to commit suicide in the same way on the same morning.
Why not?
Because ending your own life is not something the average person does. You know, everybody's assuming these are Islamic terrorists. Well, if so, they've defiled their own religion. You know, Islam does not permit suicide. It says you go to hell if you do something like this.
I'm going to interrupt you, Tom Clancy. I'm told Aaron Brown in New York has a development. Aaron?
Well, Judy, just in the last few seconds, another building number 7, has collapsed. Another building in the Trade Center complex appears now to have caved in after these attacks.
The United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts.
George W. Bush, just 9 months into his first term as president, was now in the spotlight.
We will show the world that we will pass this test. God bless.
Over the course of that month, he rallied America.
I can hear you! I can hear you, the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
Gaining a 90% approval rating as his administration prepared a response to al-Qaeda's attacks.
So why does God allow such evil?
But I think you have to look at the extraordinary love and respect that God has for each one of us. The respect that God has for his creatures is so great that he gives us this freedom of will. It's that freedom of will that allows us to become great saints, that allows us to become extraordinary people, that allows people to do great things, heroic things, wonderful things. And unfortunately, it's that same freedom of will that allows us to do terrible things, that allows us to walk away from the good. I guess if he would take that away, it would in a certain sense, destroy our being really human beings.
A lot of people say you'll remember where you were on September 11th, 2001. But I think what we will remember most is the way we lived our lives before September 11th and how we're going to have to live our lives after.